Hello, dear listeners and viewers. I have with me Miles Smith from Green Bay, Wisconsin, and he's the Director of Digital Marketing at Imaginasium. So let's hear from him, folks.
Hi, RK. Glad to be on the show and appreciate you inviting me to share some content marketing strategies and tips. As you mentioned, I'm Green Bay, Wisconsin, proud father of three and husband. And I've been in marketing, in and around marketing for quite a long time, specializing more recently in digital marketing and then even more, more of a subspecialty within content marketing and advanced SEO strategies. So excited to be here and share some tips and tricks that I've learned.
Great, great, awesome. So, like you said, in the content marketing and digital marketing strategies, right? So, what does your role look like? What do you do at day-to-day basis at Imagination?
Yeah, so we focus heavily at Imaginasium on strategy. We have a lot of experts here. I am kind of the advanced SEO and content marketing specialist on this team. And it's really where we shine is the strategy, the bigger picture, and then we obviously can execute and do the tactics and the execution of that, which is really important, believe it or not, with content marketing, specifically advanced SEO. There's lots of little details that you have to pay attention to make sure all of those are followed through on in order that you actually succeed. So we really focus on the bigger picture strategy and drive that comes from a lot of experience that we have with quite a few different clients in very different industries.
Great, great, great. Thanks for sharing that with us, Miles. And let's just talk about the long form content, right? So a lot of people struggle with writing content for SEO, or it could even be a persuasive writing, to convert a visitor into, let's say, grabbing their attention. So one thing which me and a lot of my fellow digital marketers struggle with is choosing the right way to write the content. So a lot of people say that people's attention span is decreasing every
Sure.
day by day, and then people will not take that time to read through the entire long form content. But the others say that direct response marketers say that long form is the way to go, because people are not going to trust you when you just have a short amount of content done. So what's this balance between using short form or long form, or what has worked well for you?
Yeah, there's definitely a place for both of those. I believe in short form and long form. However, if you're getting started with your content marketing efforts, I strongly believe, and we do this for our clients, I've done this for my own personal site, start with your long form content for that pillar content, because you're going to get your biggest bang for your buck. And this isn't just writing long form content for long form content's sake. You need to do strategic keyword research to identify topics that have good search volume, meaning enough people that are searching for them, that when you actually rank, it's really going to turn into some significant traffic, but also that it's not too competitive given whoever your competitors are that are trying to rank for that particular topic. And let's not forget that even once you do that keyword research, there's a real structure to how you write those articles. Technical SEO, on-page SEO is still important in terms of you can't keyword stuff, but you can strategically use your keywords through your H1, H2s, and even some anchor text throughout the article. But you need to be pulling in lots of images, curate videos. And again, you're trying to build a best of the web post on that topic. So your post, your article has to be, that much better than the ones that are in the top 10 that are ranking currently on Google. So there's a lot of strategy, there's a lot of work, and I'll admit it is a lot on the front end, but the reason to do this is that over the long term, even though you got a lot of time and money and resources on the front end, right? Over the long term, it's going to pay off because you're going to be able to not only get more traffic, but if you do it well and you have good email opt-ins on those pages, you're going to turn those into leads. And if you've got a good email series that those people get dropped into, then you'll be able to nurture those people to hopefully a sale at some point. But and the reality is, that might seem like a lot to go through to get to that point, but more and more people, they don't want to be sold. They don't want to see
Right.
ads. Ad blindness is a real thing. So obviously, I'm a firm believer in content because I've seen how it works. If you can stick
Yes.
with it over the long term, and really, digital marketing is coming back to traditional marketing, which is relationship building.
Right.
Building that brand and earning their trust over time before you ask them to buy. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use paid traffic strategies to get people that are at the bottom of the funnel, to convert into a sale today or in the next few days or week or month. I believe in that strategies, but those are becoming more costly as
Hmm.
those platforms mature. It's harder to get a direct ROI on those. Not that you can't, but it's just getting harder as those costs are creeping up. And consumers want to be, they want that relationship. They want you to give them lots of free information and help solve some of their pain points before you ask them for a sale.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Brian Dean from Backlinko, he calls it as the power page, right? So I
Yep.
think he was one of the first, digital marketing experts who actually came up with a structure for it and things like that, and called it as a power page on his website backlinko.com. And HubSpot calls it as pillar content, pillar pages,
Sure.
right? A lot of
Absolutely.
people call it different terms, but do you have any resources that our listeners and viewers can go through to understand how to get started with the long form content?
Yeah, so there's several people. I've learned a lot from Brian Dean. Certainly applied that to my own experience with clients. Robbie Richards is another great example. I don't know if
Mhm.
you know him, but he's a great marketer. I know him personally, also a great person, great person to be connected to. And those are a couple that I think of very highly because they're very case study focused. So,
Uh-huh.
you could look at hundreds or thousands of blog posts on SEO and what you should do. I tend to focus on people who've been there, done that, with case
Right.
study data, and I can look at it and I can see they're actually moving the needle. Because you can spin your wheels, waste a lot of time following, marketing advice or SEO advice that may actually be the opposite of what you want to do. So, case study data is really important to look at.
Awesome, awesome, great. So I have a link from your blog, that I'd be I'd be glad to share with our audience, which talks about 33 critical elements, right? That
Yep.
Miles has written, that you've written about
Yep.
in very detail in depth. So I'm going to add that into the show notes,
Great. Thank you, Rick.
at the end of the episode. Great, great. So let's move on to our next question. The term influencer outreach has got a lot of clout these days. A lot of people are talking about influencer outreach and why it is important and things like that. I'd like to hear from you because you've done influencer outreach very effectively, I've seen. And I'd like you to share with us some of the easiest ways that someone can get started with an influence outreach.
Yeah, influencer outreach is interesting because it's like a lot of things in marketing. You can learn everything you can from other people that have done this, and you should, but you've actually got to do it and make it your own, and you've got to succeed, and you might have some minor setbacks or failures. So I've certainly gone through those, and it's kind of an evolution. There's certainly some best ways to start with, but then you've got to, depending on your industry and what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish, kind of
Hmm.
tailor that to what you're doing. So for me, this influencer outreach has many benefits. The relationship building part of it, you're becoming more known in your industry, in your niche, for the topics that you're talking about. And if
Hmm.
you're doing long form content, which I believe in very strongly, you're going to position yourself very well with those influencers that you really know what you're talking about, because they're very educated and very experienced themselves on that particular topic. So you've got to demonstrate that first and foremost, that you really do know what you're talking about. So again, leading with that long form content, so it establishes and builds relationships and rapport with other influencers in that particular niche. You can use it to get quality backlinks. Again, if you do that well, and even some press. I mean, for clients, we've even gotten some articles and infographics listed on like Forbes
Hmm.
on their website. So there's a PR aspect, a digital PR aspect to this as well. But I will say that there comes good with the bad. So when you start doing this, you're going to learn a number of things. And don't be discouraged if you get uh, uh, an email back from somebody that's really ticked off that didn't like your outreach. Obviously, you want to be sensitive to that. And if you did something, you can take and learn from that and tweak and modify that for the next campaign. Certainly do that. I'm not saying ignore that, but don't get discouraged. For me, I would say I probably get for every positive response I get back to my influencer email outreach, I might get
Okay.
one negative to like 10 or 15 positives. So
Wow.
you
Okay.
you are going to get some, in my experience, you're going to get some people who don't like email outreach, period. So
Right.
if you're getting a higher ratio than that, then I would be, or a lower ratio, I'd be more concerned. If you're getting a lot of negative feedback, then I would pause that campaign and really go back to the drawing board. But again, I've had way more people reach out and say, "Hey, thank you for sending me this article. This is a great article. I'll consider linking to it or
Yes.
sharing it socially." Or in some cases, this doesn't happen very often, they'll actually send it out to their email list and get you some additional distribution that way.
Perfect. Perfect. So let's say that I own a brand that sells, let's say, skin products to
Mm,
that helps you to, help you glow your skin, right?
right.
So, so how can I actually get started? Whom should I be targeting, and how should my approach be structured?
So first and foremost, with influencer outreach, start with content. You've got to, if you don't have some good content that's not salesy and focused on selling,
Hmm.
you've got to start there. But in terms
Okay.
of building those lists, the way I do it, it depends on the type of influencer outreach. So sometimes I'll use a tool like Ahrefs to pull down a specific set of articles and people that are linking to those articles, and I'm trying to reach out to influencers that have linked to the highly ranking articles on that topic. So I'll use Ahrefs in that case, and then I'll use somebody on Upwork. Usually use people in the Philippines. The States, they're great with English speaking, and they're really good at the work.
Hmm.
And then they marry the names and email addresses up with those lists through a couple of processes. They'll use some software like hunter.io. There's others you can use as well.
Hmm.
And then there's some manual processes too to fill in a few additional email addresses that we can't get with Hunter that we can get either off the website or other more manual methods. So, and then a final step would really be cleaning that list to make sure it's those emails are accurate, and then
Hmm.
using some sort of cold email outreach software like
Hmm.
Mailshake, not to
Hmm.
be confused with Mailchimp.
Yes.
And Mailshake, I want to make that really clear. If you're doing influencer outreach, you do not want to use a permission-based opt-in
Agree. Yeah.
email service provider like Mailchimp.
Yes.
There are others, but use a cold email outreach because it's a different strategy. And again, I want to reinforce that you want to be reaching out with content first. Don't reach out with
Mhm.
sales using a cold email or influencer outreach approach.
Perfect. Perfect. So, if I were to summarize, how to get started, first I would start writing a lot of great quality content, very
Yeah,
helpful content on my website. And then I will, use tools like Ahrefs and other, BuzzSumo and things like that
sure.
to find out who are the influencers for that particular keywords that I'm targeting. And then I will generate a list, like you can find out emails, right? Like either find out their email address or contact information from the website, or use a tool like hunter.io or any other,
Yeah,
email finding software. And I create a list of all the contacts and probably save it in a Google Sheet or something.
correct.
And then I use a software like Mailshake, which is a cold outreach tool, and import that list of influencers inside, and I start reaching out to them and with an email saying that, hey, this is some content that I believe will be very helpful to your audience. So would you mind promoting this to your list? Right?
Correct.
In a better word, in a better way of
Yeah,
approach, right? And
absolutely. And go ahead.
and you ask them to promote it to their list by, or even share this on their social media and things like that, right?
Yeah, and I would say that the reason you use something like Mailshake is that you're automating those emails. So I usually send around a 4 email series follow
Mm-hmm.
up, unless they, and so they get all those 4 emails in a drip series unless they reply to me, and then I start a manual one-to-one conversation with them. So
Right.
it just helps automate that process rather than doing an initial email and forgetting about it. They forget about it, and there's because we all are busy, right? And it just because they didn't respond to the first email doesn't mean they aren't interested. They
Yes,
might be busy and have missed it.
absolutely. Yep, the magic is in the follow-up, like
It is.
in the first email when people don't respond, when you are persistent in following up with valuable information, it should not be like, you should never use words like I'm following up with you or things like that, right? It'll be like an insult if you
You're
have
right.
to follow up. But yeah, this is great because with a tool like Mailshake, you can actually automate a lot of manual tasks, right? And
Absolutely.
that makes a lot of sense. Great, great. Thanks a lot for sharing that information with us, Miles.
Sure.
All right, so writing content or building a list and things like that. A lot of these marketing intensive activities, right? So once you figure it out, once you have a process that works, the next step is to actually hiring a team or hiring contract resources, on Upwork or places like that to actually delegate what you are doing right now so that you can scale your efforts, right? So a lot of times we get stuck that we have to, as a business owner or a head of marketing, we feel like we have to keep on doing it all the time. But I'd like to hear from you on how you were able to effectively delegate these activities to an effective way of doing this over and over again.
Yeah, and I've been there too. Okay, I mean, I've been, you have to do everything really, and especially when you're smaller, that might be the case. Maybe you have limited resources. You're a startup. I get
Right.
that, and there's something I think good and right about that. I mean, you have to start where you are, wherever that is. But at some point, you will have to get out of that mode because you can't stay there. Otherwise, you won't be able to scale, and you'll just kind of be hitting the ceiling where you just can't seem to get above it.
Absolutely.
So for me, I mean, Upwork is a big part of that. And really, I would say it goes beyond Upwork for me, the writing resources. So I use some Upwork writers. I also use some US based writers. And I've had great success in using my LinkedIn network to identify high quality long form writers. So that long form writing, which I'm a big believer in because I've seen the power of it and how it works with advanced SEO and how it can bring in lots of traffic from Google and convert those people into leads. Um, it takes a certain level of writing skill to write something that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,000 words long,
Right.
that is engaging, that people really want to read and consume and share and link to, right? So, in most cases, for long form, I will leverage my LinkedIn network, and now I've built kind of a network of writers that I rely on that are more used to my process. Now they've kind of got trained, and they know what I'm looking for and what we need to do for deliver for those clients. Um, Now, in some cases, a simpler long form article, if it's just a simple list post, I will use somebody on Upwork. Particularly in the Philippines, I really use exclusively people in the Philippines, and I've used quite a few of them for some of this simpler long form writing, or maybe they're just writing a landing page. And then certainly on the list building for influencer outreach, I use that quite a bit. And again, all people in the Philippines. The main thing there is they're. I mean, you've got to vet them out and check them, right? And
Hmm.
but more of them are really good at speaking English well, because communication is important
Right.
when dealing with influencer outreach lists. So I use a little bit of my LinkedIn network, and again, I've leveraged that and kind of expanded that to not just people I'm directly connected with, but who do you know, and all this stuff takes time, right? To build your process. So I think the main thing is to not get discouraged in the middle of that, because I've been discouraged at times. Like, it just seems so overwhelming, and there's so much to do. Um, just take it one step at a time. Wherever you are, take that next step and the next step, and eventually, you'll start making more progress, and that will become a bit of a flywheel, and you'll see more
Hmm.
momentum. But again,
Right.
even once you're at that level where you're delegating, you're doing Upwork and using people on LinkedIn, there's still an element of you got to keep moving forward and learning and growing, and finding ways to continue to scale those efforts.
Perfect, perfect. So, uh, how much can I expect to pay someone for writing a long form content? Do you have any
Yeah,
standards? I know it is very relative.
it is.
Content is all about like creative art, right? Like different people will charge you in a different scale based on their experience and their influence. But still, if you have to really be very ROI centric, you must have some kind of a budget set aside for content marketing efforts. So if you can walk me through, how you um, create a budget, and also when you hire someone, how do you set the terms?
Yeah. So for me, and other people approach this differently. With Upwork specifically, they're either on hourly basis or project basis. I
Mm.
always do project basis, and
Okay.
but I'm also very clear with my writers and contractors because I want to develop these relationships for the long term. I'm
Right.
not interested in just doing a project and saying it's going to be X amount of dollars and not giving them half of what they need to do, and then they realize later I've spent all this time and now I'm stuck with this project, right? So that does nobody any good. So setting clear expectations is a big part of that, and
Hmm.
I have good relationship on Upwork. I'll say, hey, how did this project go? I know I like have a project, a fixed base, but like, was it more than you expected? And sometimes I'll say, okay, I'll throw you some extra money. I'll pay you a bonus on this project because, I gave pretty clear directions, but there was some things we just couldn't anticipate till we got into it, right? So having some flexibility with those people, again, think of the long-term relationship. Business success over time is not about just what can I get from you now, and and just kind of ripping people off really. um,
Right.
so as far as the budget goes, like a US writer, I have a flat fee. It's around $1,000 give or take on a long form piece of content. Again, they're following my process, and and that structure that I know is successful for my clients. If it's Upwork, writer, it can be, I'd say, anywhere from $5 to maybe $10 an hour. It depends on the project, but I mean, it
Mhm.
could be if it's a simpler long form article, it'd be a few $100s, might be $100, 150, 200, just kind of depends. So
Okay.
um, again, I've kind of figured out where is the best fit for an Upwork writer versus a US writer, and and then obviously there's a lot of strategy behind my oversight to that as well.
Hmm.
Just because I pay the writer $1,000, that's not what I charge the client, because there's a lot of oversight, editing, and then making sure all those elements get into their
Right.
website CMS.
Absolutely. And do you have any process set aside, to kind of set clear expectations with them?
Yeah. So I have a Google Doc template that I have each of my writers follow in
Uh-huh.
terms of structuring it and using Google Docs to mark those things up within the document so that the person who's going to put it into the website make sure they carry over all those technical elements. I have other Google Docs with instructions in terms of how to approach the process. And then some of it is feedback, that I've given them the document. I also might have a client document specific, like to brand personality and tone and voice and those sorts of things that we need to make sure that the writing falls in line with that. Again, might seem like that's a lot to do all that, but to do this effectively at scale, you've got to have those clear expectations and good communication around those,
Right.
what you need accomplished.
So one thing which we all take very lightly is the review and feedback process,
Yeah.
isn't it? So the content is so personal, like you really, it's nearly impossible to get it right or get it right as per my standards, right? Our standards. So it's very important that we actually have a review and a feedback mechanism. So it gets incrementally better. It can get incrementally better with every new assignment that you've given to your, team. So do you follow any feedback or review or debrief process
Yeah,
with
you
your team?
brought up a really good point, RK, because for me, going back to that long-term relationship with writers, I want them to learn my process. I need good writers, right? It has to start with a good writer first. You got to be able to write persuasively and engaging way.
Hmm.
But I want to develop a long-term relationship with them so they learn my process and they could do this, multiple times for me for different clients. Um, so as far as that process for feedback, to me, that's why Google Docs is perfect because I can leave comments, I can be in suggesting mode, I can leave all those there, and then oftentimes we'll need to have a call to talk through some of those, make sure they understand what I'm trying to communicate, and again, it all goes back to good communication. So many times having a dialogue as opposed to just comments in a document or an
Hmm.
email, you got to start there. I mean, Google Docs is a great place to leave those comments and leave that feedback and collaborate in a live situation there, as opposed to Microsoft Word, which is not as easy to collaborate.
Right.
You can leave comments, but it's not like you're resolving comments and accepting and rejecting changes right in the same document. So um, it's a bit of both. It's a bit of the technology, and then you still have to have the human element, the dialogue,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
discussion to debrief on that. And again, that all goes back to earning trust and respect. Just because I'm paying a writer, to do this article doesn't mean I should treat them poorly. I mean, they should be somebody that I'm looking to build a relationship with and make sure I take the time to give
Hmm.
them what they need to be successful, um, not just the money that I'm paying them to do that job.
Right. Great, great, great. This has been very, very useful. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot, Miles, for sharing such great information, on this episode.
You're
Uh,
very
if
welcome.
my audience wants to get in touch with you, what would be the best way?
So the marketing agency I work for, Imaginasium, we've got some great content there. We do have a piece of long form content on content marketing strategy. So if you want to, the bit.ly will be in the show notes, but it's bit.ly/ long form content. If you want to get to that article, there's also another email opt in ebook if you want to get that one that's related to content marketing on that article there as well. I also have a personal site, milesanthonysmith.com, and I'm an author as well as a digital marketer. So I write on the topics of leadership and career advice. So if you're interested in that, go to my website. There's places where you can opt in for various ebooks and all kinds of free content, in addition to the long form blog content that I have on my site. So hope that you find that successful. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Miles Anthony Smith. It's my full name. So if you look me up under that on LinkedIn, you can find me there as well.
Awesome, awesome, great. I'm going to leave all the links on the show notes for this episode. Thanks again, Miles. We had a really great conversation, and I look forward to meeting you soon.
Thank you, RK. Me as well.
Yeah, thank you.